Hi, welcome to He Leads, a Study of Roads. This is video number 6, our final video. I can't believe it's the last one, Katie.
Oh
no! I know. I think we're gonna miss hearing from everybody, and especially hearing about people's roads. That's my favorite part of this study. Is I feel like it's a little bit more intimate in the fact that you get to share the road that you're on right now, the roads that you've had in your past. And I think one of our favorite things is to hear from people about that. So today we're going to talk about Jesus Plus. Jesus Plus. And so I think this came from this idea actually was a little seed when I listened to this podcast that Craig Rochelle did. He has a leadership podcast, and Bob Goff was on there, who's one of my favorites, and
he's the balloon guy, so he's all about parties.
Right. That is true, right? Exactly. It fits perfect. And he talks about finding a mentor, and he, says to find your Bob plus 10, the person that's 10 years older than you ish, and that you kind of want to look like that in 10 years. And I thought that was super good advice. And so I kind of found a couple of Bob plus 10s, if you will. And then I realized, you know what? Jesus, he adds more. Whatever these people are adding to my life and whatever I want to add to my life, Jesus is always the plus. You know what I mean? He always adds so much more. And he doesn't just, die and rise for us, even though that's obviously salvation is the most important thing. Gosh, he's just such a plus in our life. He adds more and more and more on top of that life-giving resurrection. And whatever he adds is always wrapped up in his death and resurrection. It always speaks of that into our lives, always speaks of that restoration that we're talking about so much. But his leadership and his restoration are just ongoing and completely, I think, another layer of good in our life when even life doesn't look good,
Yeah, would there be no joy or hope. We could try and make it look like we had joy and hope, but we'd be constantly searching, which sometimes we are on our roads, walking around looking for it. But it's still there even when we don't realize it.
No, it's true. Yeah, exactly. There's always that foundational layer. And then sometimes on our roads, we get the plus. We get, to see it. We get to experience it. We get to feel it. We get to walk into the balloons and the everything, I think that helps us contextualize that. So we're going to talk about the party that Jesus brings, especially into our lives today.
I should have wore a party hat.
Oh, we said that. Today. Yes. Oh, boom. Foiled. I wanted the party hat. Oh, now I'm just sad.
When you're watching this, go put your party hat
on. I know.
On.
Someone go find a party hat. Someone
Take a picture of yourself and put it on.
Yeah.
Our social media stuff.
Right. So let's start with a fun question. Our key question for this video is, what does Jesus bring to the party? What does he bring into our lives? Not just that foundational stuff, but what are all the extras? But the fun question is, I think, what kind of party would you like to have? If you could have any party in the world, you had a party planner, you didn't have to do any of the work. What? I know, right? Have you ever watched the show Fuller House? They always have these really lavish parties on there.
They do.
And they're always really cool and very different. And one was Indian themed, and one was 1980s birthday party or whatever. And every time I'm oh my goodness, that has to cost so much money. And my daughter's you're just ruining it. Stop talking about it. And I'm but you don't understand. That's not realistic.
Just be realistic.
I know, I just need realism. So what kind of party would you have? And we're asking our listener to throw it up in the comments. What kind of party, if you could have any party, what would you have? And so, Katie, what do you think? Any party in the world?
I for sure, me and my hubby just went to, it's called the Northman Brewery near us. I would definitely have it there. And there would just be a show up when you can, because that's how I roll. And I love it when it's casual and mingling, and you can facilitate new relationships with people who haven't met each other. So yeah, I'm pretty low key on my
your party needs.
Scheduling parties or
Yeah. So. I like that. I think if I could have any party, and like in realistic life, I would just have like a dinner party where I don't cook the food, but we all sit for like a long period of time
Yes,
around
like
the
hours
food.
and hours. And if I'm being unrealistic, I don't get tired.
Ooh, that's good. And I don't turn into like my introvert self where I'm like, okay, I shut up. I'm good. I'm good with people now. Yeah. I think that if I could have any party, I really would like to have like a really fancy like black tie where we all are super dressed up and have like ball gowns necessary and probably even a red carpet. But like everyone's on the red carpet. You know what I mean? Like there's no awards or anything. Yeah. Like you're just so special that like you walk in on a red carpet. Like
now you know what you need to do for your next book release.
Okay, now I'm laughing. That's really funny. Good times. Well, this is like, hey, CPH, can you help me like organize this?
Red carpet, black tie. What do you think?
I'm sure my publisher will be all over that. Like, so next time Heidi wants a black tie up here. No, I'm just joking. Authors actually organize their own book release parties. Like, publishers don't have anything to do with that, unless I think maybe really famous authors with really big publishing companies. But that's actually a good idea. Like, you know what I realized though? It's funny as you say that and connect it to book release. Like the most important thing for me is that people show up. Like I send an invitation and they show up. And like you said, like come as you are, whatever, 5 minutes, 3 hours, whatever. I just need you to show up. Like, that's the most important part to me. And so there's nothing like, I feel like sending out an invitation and then like my last book release party, which was fine. Like, I feel like I really put myself out there and it was like on our front lawn and stuff. And we had the friends that showed up were really, it was a really awesome time. But like, I would say maybe 1/10 of the people I invited came. And so it's, it's okay. But just so you know, that happens to me too, number one. And number two, like, I think any party, it's not a party without people showing up. You know what I mean? Otherwise, it's just me having some nice things. And I think that that's what Jesus always does in our life. Like, that's one thing he always brings to the party, if you will, is that he always shows up. Like, and he never fails to show up. He's always part of our life, even when we can't see him, even when we have a hard time connecting with him because of our own stuff. He has always been there, and he's always restoring, always walking that road with us. I think that's a really important part of it. So I don't know why I have a note that I was going to share a story about field parties in high school. I don't know if that's a good idea. Okay.
I've had a similar childhood or high schoolhood, so
it was like mildly rural America, like where you would drive out to the field. I think partly because of what you were saying, like it wasn't like real organized. Like it's just something you knew happened and people came together. And I think it stuck out to me that it was like strangers. Like you're essentially partying with just like a bundle of strangers that you don't know from Adam and just getting to know people. And like, while maybe not all the best choices in life were made in those field parties. A lot of learning, right? A lot of learning. There's just something about like people coming together in masses and like everyone's invited. Like no one's left out, and so I think that's kind of cool.
That's like a neutral ground because it's not at anybody's home or anyone's church or So
yeah, totally. True story. Yeah. And so I think we'll return to that idea by the end. And, just that we'll look at Jesus in the Gospels and his message that everyone's invited to the party. He's always trying to, he's always trying to add people to his numbers. Like he's never excluding people from those numbers. Everyone's invited to know him, to believe in him, and to be forgiven by him. And I think that's really just such an element of what we need to hear on our roads is that we're invited. So, all right, let's see. We're going to look at Exodus 15 today. Okay, Katie's going to read for us. Katie, can you like move just a little to the, yep, there we go. We were missing like just a tiny side of your face.
Good thing I'm on a rolly chair.
Okay, perfect. I love it. Okay, so Exodus 15, Katie's going to read verses 1 and 2, and then I think 11 through 13. I really encourage the watcher, the listener to read the whole chapter of Exodus 15. It's a big party chapter. This is a celebration, if you will, of what God's doing. But we're going to read like little snippets of it and talk about like what's the party? Why are we celebrating? What are we celebrating? So, all right, go ahead, Katie.
Then Moses and the people of Israel sang this song to the Lord, saying, I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider he has thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will praise him. My father's God, and I will exalt him. And then I'll skip down to verse 11. Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glorious deeds, doing wonders? You stretched out your right hand, the earth swallowed them. You have led in your steadfast love. The people whom you have redeemed, you have guided them by your strength to your holy abode.
Nice.
Talk about, that's definitely Jesus including, guiding, and including.
Yeah, so. Right. And this takes place right after the Israelites walk through the Red Sea, right? And so they're definitely, number one, celebrating salvation. They have been saved from their enemies. This is huge. They're also clearly celebrating freedom, that they are no longer bound, and in chain, like literal slavery in Egypt. And so we get to celebrate those things too. First and foremost, we get to celebrate salvation in our life. We get to celebrate that we are free. Galatians 5:1 says, it is for freedom Christ has set us free. I think we often forget that we're free because we feel so chained to our lives, so chained to this path. When we forget that, wow, we don't have control of everything and we can't just like get a new life. Like you can sometimes, but a lot of times you have kids or you have a responsibility or whatever. Or
you have to buy groceries, so you have to go to work.
Right. Like the bills need to be paid. Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. Like, we're adulting. We can't just walk away from those things, but there's a whole lot of choice in how we do that. And sometimes we can. Sometimes we can change the path. And so where is God opening places and spaces for us to walk into freedom more often? It's not just metaphoric. It's not just, Jesus gives us freedom on the cross for eternity. Like we do have a lot of freedom right now. And I think that's really important in that message from the Israelites. Like they feel unbounded, I guess, in their celebration.
Yeah. The one thing I was thinking, if God wouldn't have stopped the Egyptians when they were pursuing them, I wonder if they would have ever felt the freedom they did. Because would they have always had that in the back of their head that, we were slaves. So, and they wanted to go back too.
I know.
When they thought so. And I'm the same way. You want to go back because it's comfortable, even when God has set you on a new path.
Right. Yeah. And keeping in mind that right after this, they're going to start grumbling again. Like, sometimes I think we, especially with like the joy of Jesus and those layers of things that he adds to our life, like the experience of joy, we think that if we're not in it all the time, like there's something wrong with our path.
Yep.
But if you watch, like there's an ebb and flow to life. And while, we don't want to grumble to God, at the same time we can. That's a really cool thing.
If you read the Psalms, there's plenty of that in there.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and just being aware that that's something that God, he values both on our roads, both the like, woo, celebration, like that mountaintop time for celebration, as well as kind of, the normal road walking forward. Like you see both in the scriptures. We certainly, when we choose to live in the grumble, I think we are robbing ourselves a little bit of the party. We can have more joy, more experience of joy in, in gratitude and just like living forgiven, like knowing we're forgiven and extending that to others, that certainly extends the party, I guess.
Yeah, when you're not working to justify everything you do, or when you don't try and justify every action and say, well, I did this because.
Yeah, right. Right.
So that's where I think so much freedom comes in, when you realize, well, Christ completed it for us.
Yeah.
So we just get to walk on this risen road now.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if you look closer at Exodus in verse 9, for instance, it talks about the spoils, like they're celebrating the spoils of the battle, basically. And in the Old Testament, like you see a lot of spoils are like treasures or like animals or the things that you take from the nation, once you've like kind of decimated their power there. In this instance, the spoils are God's people. God is calling us his treasure in that he is celebrating his rescue of us. And so I think it's cool that it's not just our party. Like God is the instigator of the party. He's the creator of the party. And he like welcomes us into that. And I just think that's a really powerful thing. Like, I think we would miss that snippet that we are the treasure of the party. God is like hosting a party for us, because of us, because of his like bringing us in. It's like makes me think of a housewarming, like, or a baby shower. Like you're celebrating like the introduction of your new person that you're welcoming into this world, or you're celebrating this new thing that you have, this house. And that's what God is doing, inviting
or
the
a wedding
world.
shower, especially when the in-laws are throwing it for you. That always feels like welcome to the family. We want to bestow these gifts on you. So
yeah, it's totally true. Yeah. And I even think of the smaller, more intimate version of that, like when my husband and I only dated for 4 months before we got engaged. So the first time I went to his family's house, like we were engaged. And I had met them before. But I had never been to their house. So they invited me for Christmas, and so it's a small party, right? It's an intimate party, this like Christmas kind of gathering, and we're playing games and we're just opening a few presents and sitting and looking at the Christmas tree with our cocoa. And I mean, that's God. God has an intimacy level with us too, where he's welcoming us in. And then he also has the broad, big thing where he's showing the world, his treasure too. And so I don't know, he covers all the bases. That's like the point of the video, right? Jesus plus, he's everything. He's the whole package and more. So,
yeah.
So I was thinking about earlier in our study, we talked about the road marks, the posts that God leaves in our lives that are these celebrations. This was in the nation of Israel. Then they celebrate, right? The Passover, when God brought them out of Egypt. So it's a marker in their lives. What markers has God put in our lives that are celebrations of what he's done, so that he can show the world, what he's done in his people, and show off my husband talked about in a sermon like a while back, like that he's displaying his bride, he's displaying the church for his people. Like he's super proud of us. He really wants the world to see, us and this group that he has brought in. So what kind of celebrations come to mind, Katie, for you that God brings into our lives to celebrate his work?
Well, I think, to give the super Lutheran answer, communion.
Oh, I thought you were going to say baptism. So I mean,
if you go right to the sacrament.
Yeah, right.
Baptism, communion. But when you were talking about that, how he wants to show us off, I think that speaks to the heart of vocation, that he uses us to bring people into his kingdom, and he doesn't just like shoot them with a lightning bolt.
Yeah, he could.
And create faith in them. Yeah, he could. Or he could, like, just, in Gene V's books, God on Vocation, he talks about God could have just create each individual human being, but instead he put them in families.
Mm-hmm. Right. And same thing with the church. Like, he doesn't, like, have to have it that way. Like, he could have done it however he wanted, but...
it would be a lot less messy.
No joke, right?
If you didn't let us get involved.
Right. No joke. No joke. Well, and I think we forget too that God is the creator of weddings, and in the Catholic Church, like that's a sacrament in itself. And we don't have it as a sacrament in Lutheranism and in the Reformed traditions and stuff because not everybody celebrates it. And so for us, we believe that sacraments, everyone needs to be able to celebrate it. But, that is still something that God has given us as a celebration. Even if, it's like at the courthouse and stuff, weddings, no matter what they look like, are this huge celebration of life and what God is creating and doing. That's a big thing. And then I also think about funerals, like the fact that there's a burial and whatever that looks like. And we're not going to get into like massive theological things about like people being cremated or not cremated and stuff, but God institutes, what's the word? Like, methods, that's not the word, like traditions and routines. Basically he gives a place for our grieving. He gives a place. And God, even he gave the Israelites in the Old Testament, which would be, it would do well for us to pick these back up, is like very physical grieving rituals, very obviously overt ways of grieving. I think that's really mental healthy, if we would do those things. But those are from God. Like, I think a lot of times we think funerals and stuff are our idea, when if you go back, those are rituals that God instituted. We might do them differently now, but there's still an act of God, that there's this closure, there's this burial, there's this place where we, put the dead down, and then God is going to rise up. I think that's a powerful
thing. I think that speaks back to week 4 very clearly, that God's in the brokenness too. Like he's in these celebrations, but he's also in the brokenness.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good. And I encourage people to go back. If you didn't get to read, week 4, like go back, and you can just probably search brokenness, at HeidiGaiman.com. But find those, because sometimes I think, especially when we're in the brokenness, and we're here talking about parties, it's frustrating. You're like, it doesn't feel like a party. How is God still celebrating? So if you take the funeral, which I think is our, loss is that number one way we understand like brokenness just coming into our lives. How is God still, what do we still have to celebrate? What is he doing? I think that's a powerful thing. So then looking at, like we said, who's invited to the party? Who is God reaching? What is he doing? We have Matthew 22, verses 8 through 10. Matthew 22, 8 through 10. And Katie will read that, and we'll look at, how is God trying to extend the celebration, I guess. Sometimes we hold the celebration close, thinking there's not enough if I let go of the celebration, as if
somebody's gonna take it away.
Yeah, right. Like you can steal my celebration. It doesn't work that way. So,
or sometimes I think I get apprehensive about celebrating things for a myriad of reasons, but maybe that it'll get taken away, or I'll look foolish because I'm so excited about something.
Ooh, that's good. Yeah, I like that. So what does Jesus say about the celebration now, since he's come and died and rose, in Matthew 22, 8 through 10?
It says, "Then he said to his servants, 'The wedding feast is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore to the main roads and invite to the wedding feast as many as you find.' And those servants went out into the road and gathered all whom they found, both bad and good. So the wedding hall was filled with guests."
I love it. Filled. It was filled. And I think about, like it says, that those invited were not, or those who, they were not worthy. And I think, when it comes down to it, those are just people who said no, thank you. Like, I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Like, we have the ability to say, I want Jesus in my life. Like, I don't just want the plus. I want Jesus. And when we say no, thank you, we are turning away the invitation to the wedding feast of eternity. We are turning aside from this party that God's created and designed for us, where there's no tears, where there's only joy, where evil is conquered forever and ever and ever. As Christians, I think we're like, why would you say no, thank you? And I think there's probably 8,000 reasons why people say no, thank you. But I love that Jesus just keeps going back out. Like in this parable, you see him go out and out and out again to bring in people till it's full.
Yeah. Awesome.
I know, I love that part. So here's the question to end our video. What's your Jesus plus? So what do you see that Jesus brings into your life that wouldn't be there without him? That's what wouldn't be there without him. What is he adding to your life that isn't just salvation and redemption and all those things, which is super important, and they're always going to be layered in the other things. But what else does he bring? And I thought of 3 things, and Katie's going to speak to a little bit about them too. But connection is one thing that God brings to my life. Comfort. I don't know how people live without that comfort. I just can't even. And then compassion. My ability to engage in the world around me because I know what I have in Christ. Then I can begin to have, even any amount of reasonableness in this broken world. So, yeah. How about you, Katie? What of those speak to you, or what does Jesus add to your life?
I think definitely the depth of friendships. Like where I met my richest friendships have been at Bible studies. Whether I'm leading them or I'm just a attending member. You talk about hard things, and it breaks down barriers, I think, to get into people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, no, I think that's true. That connection is certainly there, and you're giving each other comfort.
Yes,
and
you
have that compassion.
Have it in there, comfort and compassion and connection. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it changes our lens. That's one thing I'm most grateful for Jesus. Is that he changes the lens. He changes the way I view things. So not only for myself, like I don't have to feel so much weight and so much sadness and burden at the world around me, but he changes my viewpoint for when I interact with other people. I, instead of assumptions, I can come forward with grace. I don't do it perfectly all the time.
No.
But when I let him into those conversations, and when I let him do his stuff in me, then, you get to really see that. And just knowing that the Holy Spirit then is, one with Jesus, and he's just always adding, always filling in the gaps and the blanks where I have missed the mark. That's really, truly, I feel like a reason to have a party, to have some joy, in our lives. So awesome. We want to hear from the listener. What do you see that Jesus brings into your life that wouldn't be there without him? Whether that's concrete, people, things, names, whatever, or whether those are those kind of abstract ideas that we were sharing. We'd love to hear from you. What is he bringing into your world? This has been an awesome Bible study series to connect with our readers and to hear from them, what their roads looked like we said at the beginning. And I hope that you all will continue to connect with Katie and I. Katie's at lovedinspiteofself.com, and you can find me at HeidiGaiman.com. And you can also find us under those handles on Instagram and all the other places and spaces, Facebook and all of that, to stay in touch. We'd love to hear more from you. Any closing thoughts, Katie?
I got nothing.
Nothing.
But I'm so glad all of you joined us, and it is great to hear about other people's roads, and especially how Jesus has been there for them.
Yeah, I agree. Awesome. All right. So dear listener, go live your Jesus plus, let him in, and just keep looking for him on your road, because he is certainly there, and keep looking for him on those roads in Scripture. It's great to be with you. We'll see you next time.